Welcome to the second installment of the series, The Best on the Internet, where I test the top recipes on the internet to find out which one's actually the best. Today we are tackling a big topic, brownies. Not only do we have some heavy hitters on this episode, but they all claim in one way or another to be the best. We'll be testing Joshua Weissman's Most Perfect Brownie, Food Wish's Best Brownie, Claire Saffitz' Malted Milk Forever Brownies, Duff Goldman's The Brownie, and the top result on YouTube when you search the best brownies from Tasty, the best brownies you'll ever eat. I know that's a lot of air quotes, but those are some big claims and we gotta test them out. We got a lot of baking to do, so let's get to it. We're starting off with the Tasty recipe, which is by far the most complicated. The recipe calls for Dutch processed cocoa, as well as espresso powder and melted chocolate. The only other recipe we're testing that uses cocoa and melted chocolate is Claire Saffitz Forever Brownies. This is all melted down with hot butter, which serves a double purpose of blooming the cocoa and melting the chocolate. Next they call for sugar, vanilla, salt, and eggs to be mixed on high in an electric mixer for a whopping 10 minutes. Other recipes point this step out as important, but none of them call out for this level of whippage. The melted chocolate mixture is then added, followed by the flour and the rest of the cocoa. That will go into a prepared dish, then baked for only 20 minutes before the final trick of this recipe, where Tasty calls for you to remove the brownies and whack them against the countertop, which is supposed to improve the texture and the general evenness. Back into the oven for another 20 minutes, and now we have our finished product. Joshua Weissman is the next chef up. I had to make a judgment call since his video featured 3 brownie recipes, and when he tasted them, he liked the second batch the best, which were the chewy version. His website actually only had the ingredients for the first version, the fudgy brownies, but he listed the ingredient amounts for the chewy brownies in the video, so I went by those. This will be important for a reason you'll see in a bit here. In order to boost the chewiness, the recipe calls for a mixture of butter and neutral oil, another trait that is only shared with Claire's recipe. Interestingly, Joshua's brownies are the only ones to use cocoa as the sole chocolate ingredient in the batter. The cocoa also isn't bloomed with hot water or butter. Regardless, you do get a nice velvety texture in the batter once the ingredients are all combined. Into a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes, and I got something that looks flat and smells overdone. Giving Joshua the benefit of the doubt, I figured he either gave a wrong measurement in the video or I made a mistake somewhere, so I ended up making his official written recipe, the fudgy brownies, from his website. The recipes were similar, with cocoa being the only chocolate in the batter, but espresso powder and chocolate chunks were added as well. These were all butter as opposed to butter and oil, and utilized granulated sugar only, as opposed to the combination of brown and granulated sugar in his chewy recipe. Into the oven at the same time, but for about 5 minutes more, and we have something that looks and smells much better. Food Network's Duff Goldman, as well as all the remaining recipes, utilize a double boiler to melt chocolate for the brownie batter. One thing that sticks out to me about this recipe is that it calls for 3 eggs and 2 yolks, by far the most of any recipe using a 9x9 or 8x8 pan. It also has the highest sugar to flour and cocoa ratio of any of the recipes. Duff is alone with Chef John in using melted chocolate as the sole source of chocolate flavor in the batter, but it also includes chocolate chunks to boost the chocolatey flavor. Into a 350-degree oven for about 40 minutes, and here is the result. Claire Saffitz had the only recipe other than Tasty to call for Dutch processed cocoa, which she blooms with hot water before adding the other ingredients going into the double boiler to melt. The Forever Brownies join Joshua Weissman's chewy brownie in calling for both oil and butter. I would say that this recipe is the second most complicated, with the highest number of ingredients at 14, but like many of the staple recipes she develops, the use of a stand mixer was not required. While no stand mixer is required, Claire does give you a workout in this recipe, calling for intense mixing both when the sugar and eggs are added to the chocolate, as well as when the dry ingredients, which include the unique ingredient of malted milk powder, are added. Now the recipe demands 45 seconds of vigorous whisking, or pouring into a pan lined with aluminum foil and baking in a 350-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. As might be expected from Chef John, his Food Wishes recipe is by far the most simple, with only 7 ingredients, half of Claire's Forever Brownies. His recipe stands alone in calling for 100% cacao chocolate, which is the sole source of chocolate flavor. While it is simple ingredients, the recipe required a double boiler and an electric mixer, which counterintuitively made it a little bit more labor intensive. The batter was on the thick side, but it smoothed out just fine. This will go into a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes, and like all the brownie recipes we're testing today, we'll let cool completely before cutting and enjoying. 6 brownie recipes later, and it's time to actually taste these things. Very excited. I'm also a little bit nervous about eating 6 brownies all in one sitting, but what other choice do I have? I'm doing this for you. We're gonna start out with Tasty's recipe. It was a very complicated recipe. It had a lot of components. We're very specific about a lot of the different methods. Here we go. It's definitely chewy. Sticks to the roof of your mouth in a good way. The texture is amazing. It's very soft. It's very chewy. It's a little sweet, maybe a little bit sweeter than I would prefer. But you know what? All these brownie recipes have a lot of sugar. So I think that's probably gonna be something we see throughout. So it's kind of hard to tell in the first one. So I'm gonna move on to the next, which is Duff Goldman's The Brownie Recipe. The top sheen on Duff Goldman's brownies, definitely the best out of all of them. It's extremely uniform. It has that really ripply texture. That's a good sign. Very tasty. It's a very, very dense brownie. This is definitely in the fudgy category. If you like a fudgy brownie, this one's definitely for you. And he does have the chopped pieces of chocolate, not just in the batter, but mixed in at the end as well. So you get the really fudgy brownie, you get the chocolate. For me, it's a little bit too much on the fudgy side. It's just super, super dense. It's not that chewy, so that's what it is. Moving on to food wishes. It's always fun to try Chef John's recipes, learning how to cook, and still today, there's some things I make all the time. Feeling it, it's definitely softer, way softer than the Duff Goldman, and the Tasty too. And it seems to kind of have multiple layers of texture. You can kind of see more doneness on top, and then you have a nice chewy looking layer there. So I'm gonna dig in. Much, much softer. Not chewy either, but not cakey. This definitely has a fudginess to it. The edge piece, the caramelization is really nice all around. I really like this brownie. So Joshua Weissman, he said in the video that the chewy brownie was the best. But when I made it, I haven't tasted it yet, so I don't know, but it did not look very good. No glossy top, following the baking directions, it came out a little burnt. Yeah, something isn't right there. It is very tender, but it's cakey, and I don't think that's what he was going for. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna chalk this one up to somebody made a mistake. It was either me or Josh. Giving Josh the benefit of the doubt, it's probably me, so too bad for this one. Joshua Weissman's fudgy brownie. Now, this was the recipe that was actually listed on his website, had all the ingredient amounts and the directions and everything. It did turn out a lot nicer looking. It had a shinier top. Redemption opportunity. Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. It's a very tender brownie. The salt really comes through. Like, you can get a good number of like textures. Duff Goldman's brownie recipe is way closer to just like having fudge, but this is definitely a brownie. It's definitely fudgy, and it's an overall pretty good experience. Now on to Claire Saffitz Malted Forever Brownies. Anyone who's a fan of baking is a fan of Claire. Here we go. So when these came out of the oven, they got a really hard outside edge. I was afraid that I'd overcook them, and now eating it, I'm almost afraid that I undercooked it. One thing I love about Claire's recipes is she always uses an indicator whenever she's talking about how long to do something, including bake times. And the indicator for this recipe was that the center is dry to the touch but still soft when pressed, which is what I did. What a lot of people do with their brownie recipes is they say it's like a super fudgy brownie and it's super gooey, but all they really do is undercook it. And I think what Claire was going for here was a brownie that had the same effect, but tasted better and was fully cooked through. And I think she nailed it. I'm not sure I'd put this in the fudgy category. Definitely not cakey either. It's kind of its own thing. The malted milk powder, you can really taste that. It's pretty good, not really my taste. The two finalists, I think, are Food Wishes and Tasty. So this is really close, and making a decision was not easy, but I'm gonna have to go with the Tasty brownies. Texture is exactly perfect. The use of espresso powder helps boost the chocolate flavor. The use of Dutch processed cocoa combined with chocolate really made for a luscious chocolate flavor, very indulgent and very delicious. So congratulations to you. If you like these types of recipe testing videos, we have a lot more coming. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.